In Planet Reddit, today's story is...
My wife confessed that she married me for my money after 10 years and her daughter treated me like an ATM. They never imagined my devastating revenge. I am 42 years old and I've been married for a decade to my wife Maggie, 39. She has a daughter called Remy, 17, from her previous marriage to Esteban, a 40-year-old. When I married Maggie, I fully understood that Remy was part of the package and I was completely willing to take on that role. As I had decided not to have children of my own, I thought it would be a good balance to enjoy a family life without the pressure of having my own children. Maggie and Esteban separated when Remy was just 3 years old. From what I understand, the divorce was not particularly conflictive, but they do not have a strong shared parenting relationship either. Esteban participates to a certain extent, although less than he could. He pays child support, but he doesn't spend much time with Remy. I entered Remy's life when she was 6 years old. I met Maggie 3 years after her divorce during a friend's wedding. We started talking and connected immediately. At the end of the celebration, I asked her out and she accepted. We've been together ever since. At first everything seemed simple and natural, and we built a life together. I believed that our happiness would last forever, but as time went by, I began to notice changes in our relationship that made me see things from a different perspective. I tried hard to be a positive influence on Remy. I did everything from helping her with her homework to financing her extracurricular activities, making sure she had opportunities that I didn't have during my childhood. What any parent would do. I even set up a college fund for her when I married Maggie because at the time I considered her my daughter, even if not biologically. Nowadays the situation has become quite complicated. Remy has developed a rather negative attitude in recent years, especially towards me. Initially I thought it was just typical teenage behavior, but I abandoned that idea when I saw it progressively worsening. She acts as if I don't exist, treats me as if I were just a source of money and makes sarcastic comments about how I'm not her real father. I've tried to talk to her to improve our relationship, but it always ends in failure. Last week, the situation reached a critical point. Remy was in a bad mood, slamming doors all over the house and making a fuss over something insignificant, like running out of her favorite shampoo. I usually try not to make a big deal out of these things. I understand that teenagers have difficult days. But this time it affected me more than usual because I had spent the whole weekend helping her complete a school project. I took her to the library several times, bought the last-minute materials I had forgotten and stayed up late on Sunday helping her perfect everything. I thought that my efforts would at least earn some gratitude, or at least neutral attitude. Instead, she was dismissive and rude. She ignored me when I greeted her, she left her things lying around even though I had asked her to pick them up, and she muttered complaints about how annoying other people's rules were. When she made that hurtful comment, I could no longer ignore it. I decided to say something. Calmly, I pointed out that her behavior was disrespectful and that the way she was treating me was not okay. I mentioned everything I had done for her recently, hoping to remind her that I was on her side and did not deserve such treatment. Her response left me stunned. She made it unequivocally clear that she did not see me as someone with the authority to comment on her actions. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, with sharp, painful words. I felt it was deliberate, as if she wanted to remind me of my place in her life, or rather, the absence of it. I was really surprised. After all the time, effort and resources I had invested in helping her succeed, this was how she perceived me, not as a father, not even as part of the family, but as someone with no right to have an opinion about her behavior. What happened next was even more painful. Maggie was nearby and clearly heard the whole conversation. I thought she would intervene, support me, or at least try to mediate. Instead, she sided with Remy. She basically confirmed that I had no authority to discipline her daughter, and insinuated that I was overstepping my bounds by trying to do so. That was even worse than anything Remy had said. It wasn't just a momentary disagreement, it was a rejection of the role I thought I had in this family. I have invested so much time, energy, and money in this family, and now I am being told that I have no say in my own home. Well, if I'm just the bill payer, I guess I'll start behaving like one. This is where the situation became controversial. As I mentioned, I set up a college fund for Remy when Maggie and I got married. This fund was completely mine, separate from Maggie's finances, and it wasn't something Esteban had contributed to either. Originally, I planned to cover a significant portion of Remy's tuition to give him a good start in life, but after that conversation, I began to reconsider things. If I'm not part of the family enough to have an opinion about Remy's attitude, why should I be part of the family enough to finance his university education? So I decided to dissolve the university fund and transfer the money to my retirement account. I didn't immediately announce this decision to Remy and Maggie. I didn't want to be petty, but Maggie found out when she went to check the account balance for a school-related expense. She confronted me, furious, accusing me of using the money against them. She said I was destroying Remy's future out of spite and acting childish. I explained that I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was simply relocating my money for my own future, as I am clearly not considered part of hers. My wife argued that I was being unfair, especially as Remy is still only a teenager and does not fully understand the consequences of her actions. I replied that if she is old enough to disrespect me and remind me that I am not her father, then she is old enough to face the reality that I am not obliged to support her as a father would. Before anyone jumps to conclusions, I am not a heartless person. I did not leave Remy with no options. I told Maggie that if Remy really wants to go to university, he can look for a job, apply for scholarships, or get Esteban to take responsibility for once. He has alternatives, he just won't have a free ride funded by me anymore. This whole situation has created a huge divide between Maggie and me. She thinks I'm acting out of revenge, while I feel I'm just setting necessary boundaries. Some of Maggie's family members are stepping in, saying I'm going too far, but from my point of view, I've been more than generous, and all I've received in return is resentment and disrespect. I didn't marry Maggie to be treated like a wallet, and if my contributions are not appreciated, then I will gladly step aside and focus on myself. So, am I the bad guy for turning my stepdaughter's college fund into my retirement fund, after my wife and her daughter made it clear that I'm not really part of the family? Update. I have noticed some comments pointing out the way I expressed myself when I mentioned that I had invested money in Remy. I understand why it might sound bad, as if I were reducing her to a transaction or acting as if she owed me something. That was not at all what I meant. I did not invest all that time, effort, and money in her expecting compensation. I didn't want her to feel indebted to me or think she was obligated to anything. I did it because I genuinely believed she was part of this family, and helping her succeed was simply what a family member does. What hurts the most is not the money, it's realizing that they never considered me part of the family. Maggie's words about me not being Remy's father weren't just about discipline, they were a rejection of my place in their lives. For years, I thought I was building something meaningful with both of them. I believed I was more than just the person who pays the bills, that I was a father figure and a husband whose contributions mattered. But when they treated me like an ATM, how was I supposed to feel? If I'm just here to provide resources, why can't I call it an investment? It seems like that's what they've been thinking all along. A few days after the argument with Maggie and Remy, I received a message from Esteban, Remy's biological father. We don't usually communicate much, so it was unexpected to hear from him. His message was brief. He wanted me to talk about Remy. When we met, he started acting overly friendly, as if we were old friends. He made a few jokes, tried to laugh at unimportant things, and seemed to be playing a role. It was uncomfortable and insincere, and I wasn't fooled. After a few minutes of his fake cordiality, I asked him to get straight to the point. It was then that he abandoned the charade and told me bluntly that I should reconsider paying for Remy's university education. According to him, my decision to withdraw the university fund was selfish and motivated by pride. He claimed that I was punishing Remy for behaving like a normal teenager and allowing my pride to get in the way of what was best for her. For years, I have been the one to take financial responsibility for Remy. Esteban has done the bare minimum as a father, but there he was, accusing me of failing him, while taking the credit for being a father without doing hardly anything. I reminded him that he was Remy's father, not me. If anyone had an obligation to pay for her college education, it was him. He immediately became defensive, claiming that he couldn't afford it. I didn't buy that excuse. Esteban has a good job and could easily cover the costs of his education if he really wanted to. The truth is that he just doesn't want to spend the money. For years he's been content to let me handle most of the financial responsibilities. And now that I've stepped aside, he's desperate to put that responsibility back on me. I made it clear to him that it was too late for that. I wasn't going to change my mind or go back on my decision. The college fund had been withdrawn and it was no longer my problem. That's when Esteban decided to escalate the situation. He didn't get the reaction he was hoping for. I remained calm, didn't let myself be provoked, and walked away when it became clear that the conversation was going nowhere. Since then, he has sent me several messages ranging from attempts to make me feel guilty to veiled threats and appeals to my sense of responsibility. One minute he accuses me of ruining Remy's future, and the next he tries to appeal to the fact that I have cared for her for years. Stephen has had every opportunity to take care of his daughter and he still has them. If he really cares about Remy's education, he will find a way to pay for it himself. This whole situation has forced me to reflect deeply on my relationship with Maggie, Remy, and even Stephen. I don't think my decision to dissolve the college fund was an easy one, but I do believe it was the right one. At this point, I feel like I have been tested from every angle. I have tried to do the right thing for years, even when my efforts were not recognized or valued, but now I have reached my limit. I will not allow people to take advantage of me, no matter how many times they try to make me feel guilty. It's sad because I really care about Remy and want her to succeed, but I've realized that my involvement in her life has always been on their terms. They wanted my money and support, but they didn't want to give me the respect or the role that should have accompanied that support. And now that I've set limits, everyone is upset, not because I'm wrong, but because it makes them uncomfortable. If they want to see me as an ATM, they'll have to accept that I decide when the transactions stop. Update 2. Recently, the situation has escalated with my wife Maggie and her daughter Remy. Yes, I now specifically say her daughter. After all the controversy over Remy's college fund, she has decided not to attend college at all. Maggie was quick to hold me responsible for this. She insists that my decision to dissolve the college fund completely demotivated Remy. Although I regret that Remy feels this way, I fail to understand how all this responsibility falls on me when I am not her biological father. She should be having this conversation with Esteban. Isn't he the one primarily responsible? Esteban has been conspicuous by his absence in all the practical aspects of parenting, especially when it comes to finances. He has a good job and can pay more than enough to cover his university education. However, he has always strictly limited himself to the obligatory child support and nothing more. I don't understand why the moment my contribution ceased, everyone started acting as if Remy's future was exclusively my responsibility. I could no longer ignore the unfairness of the situation, so I mentioned it to Maggie. I asked her directly why Esteban was not covering the cost of Remy's college education. Far from acknowledging that I had a valid point, Maggie completely changed the subject. She went on to claim that I was the one who had let Remy down and that my decision to redirect the college fund had been selfish and malicious. I even pointed out that she also bears some responsibility, because Remy doesn't just have a father, he also has a mother, who could contribute to his education. Bringing this up got us nowhere. The conversation became increasingly frustrating, with Maggie beating around the bush and avoiding answering directly. Then she said something that confirmed what many had commented on in my previous posts and that even I had suspected for some time. Maggie mentioned that she believed it was my obligation to pay for Remy's university because she had married me mainly for the financial security I provided her. At first I wasn't sure I had heard her correctly. It seemed like the sort of thing one would expect someone to exaggerate during a heated argument, not something they would actually admit. But there it was, stated with complete clarity. I stopped her and asked her to clarify what she meant by that. She hesitated, tried to backtrack and failed to offer me a coherent explanation. That moment changed everything for me. Hearing her reduce our relationship to a simple financial arrangement, hearing her openly admit that she saw me as a means to an end, was worse than a betrayal. Deep down, I always had the feeling that my financial situation played an important role in why Maggie was interested in keeping me around. I tried to convince myself that it was only part of our relationship, but now, hearing her express it directly, I felt that my worst fears were coming true. At least she was honest, although I don't think it was intentional, and she probably only said it to hurt me during our argument. Either way, it helps me make up my mind. After taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I told Maggie that I couldn't continue with this situation. If she really saw me only as a source of financial security, then I refused to continue playing that role. I told her that I wasn't going to be her ATM anymore and that they needed to find somewhere else to live as soon as possible. I didn't want the situation to escalate unnecessarily, but I couldn't allow this to continue either. This revelation has led me to question absolutely everything. Did Maggie ever really see me as a life partner, or was I just a convenient financial solution? Did Remy ever consider me a father figure, or was I just the person who made things easier for her? At this point, I feel that I have done everything I can to be a good husband and stepfather. I have supported them financially, emotionally, and in every other way I could imagine. But now I get the impression that none of that mattered as much as my ability to pay the bills. Update 3. A few weeks ago, Maggie and Remy moved out. I thought that would be the end of it, but last week, Maggie got in touch. She asked me to meet up and I didn't think it was a good idea. However, in a moment of weakness, I decided to hear what she had to say. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I thought it might provide some kind of closure. We met for lunch in a restaurant. When she saw me, she started crying almost immediately. She apologized for everything. She admitted that she was wrong to treat me the way she did, seeing me only as a source of income. She said she loved me and couldn't imagine going on with her life without me. I listened to her as she cried and begged me to reconsider our separation, telling me how sorry she was for what she had done. But as sincere as she seemed, nothing changed for me. All I could remember was the moment when she confessed that she had married me for financial security. I had been hoping somewhere deep down that when we met, he would tell me that it had been said in a moment of anger, out of frustration, and that it did not reflect his true feelings. But that was not what happened. Instead, he confirmed it. He told me that what he had said was true, that he really meant it. And in that moment I knew for sure. I gave her the opportunity to speak, to apologize, to try to make things right, but when she finished, I told her I wanted a divorce. Maggie really tried to change my mind, but I explained that my decision was final. I remained calm even when she became upset and started to verbally attack me. I don't know why, but I always try to keep my cool. I think losing my composure only makes difficult situations worse. Making this decision was not easy. I still have feelings for Maggie, but the person I thought I knew is not who she really is. I no longer trust her, because I doubt that she ever truly loved me. Maybe she did at the beginning and then that feeling faded, or maybe she never felt that way about me. Either way, that's all I need to know to make the decision to divorce. There is simply no point in staying married under these circumstances. Since that meeting, things have been quiet. I haven't heard much from Maggie. She hasn't even written or called me since our encounter. I think she finally understood that my decision was not going to change. Update 4. I have formally initiated divorce proceedings. Honestly, I didn't realize how difficult it would be. I thought that once the decision was made, things would be simpler, but the reality is much more complex than I imagined. There are many more aspects involved than simply signing documents and going our separate ways. Maggie calls me from time to time. Each conversation follows the same pattern. She tries to convince me to reconsider my decision. She asks me to come back and we'll sort out our problems. She assures me that she's sorry, that she loves me, and that she can't imagine life without me. On one occasion I told him that I was going to give him my phone number instead of my money because he seemed to have got confused and wanted to talk to him instead of me, from the way he was expressing himself. When I mentioned it to him, he got angry and hung up abruptly, but a few days later he called again as if nothing had happened. After several similar calls, I decided to block his number. Remy hasn't even contacted me, and as far as I know, he's sticking to his decision not to attend university. Update 5. The divorce has finally been completed. I feel as if a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders, and off my bank account too, because I was the one who had to deal with Maggie and Remy the most. Even Esteban felt entitled to claim my money. Fortunately, the process wasn't as drawn out as I feared. We didn't have to go to court, which my lawyer had warned could be quite complicated. It all went quite smoothly because, on his advice, we had signed a very well-drafted prenuptial agreement. That's what you get when you have good legal advice. This agreement made the division of assets much easier and ensured that everything was handled quickly and fairly. I can't imagine how much more difficult it would have been without it. It saved me the stress and uncertainty of a protracted legal battle. Instead, the process moved relatively quickly once the paperwork was started. I consider that a small blessing in the midst of this whole situation. Maggie, on the other hand, was not so willing to let things go. Even at the last moment, she was still trying to convince me to change my mind. I often wonder what would have happened if we hadn't had that prenuptial agreement. Would she have insisted so much on saving our love, or would she have let the divorce take its course? She could have gotten some of my retirement fund, so I really don't know. The only thing I know for sure is what happened in this reality where I had a legal agreement, and that is that she kept telling me that she was sorry, that she loved me, and that we could work things out if I gave her another chance. Fortunately, I was clear about my decision and knew exactly why I had made it. A few days before the divorce was finalized, Remy contacted me. He apologized for everything that had happened and hoped that this would change my decision. He was a little late, as the documents had already been filed. I replied thanking him for his apology and explained that my decision was final. I sincerely wish him the best for his future. And I really mean it. I think Remy is going to need a lot of luck if he wants to achieve anything meaningful in life, because his entitled attitude and insincere apology won't get him very far. Update 6. My story seemed to have ended with the divorce that ended 2 years ago. You can check my previous posts on my profile if you don't know all the details. However, these days I have been reflecting on everything that has happened, and I thought, why not share an update to tell how my life and the lives of the other people involved have continued? I have found a woman to share my life with, but I have learned my lesson and she has no children. She never wanted to have them, and I am at a stage in my life where I don't want to deal with that responsibility. Previous experience has been more than enough for me, nor is she with me because of my financial situation, as she pays for her own expenses, including her apartment. Although we have a formal relationship, we each live in our own space. I'm not saying it will be like this forever, but neither of us has mentioned the idea of moving in together for the moment. She also often invites me to dinner, paying the full bill. Although I also invite her on occasion, it is not a case of me taking advantage of her. At least she has shown me that it is possible to find relationships based on genuine affection and not on economic interest, something that had made me quite distrustful. Maggie has moved house several times as I understand it, and has faced financial problems due to numerous credit card debts. When she lived with me, she was able to keep them up to date, as I covered many of the household expenses, but after the divorce the debts grew until they became unsustainable. I don't know how she is handling the situation now, as I have lost touch with her over the years. However, as far as I knew, she had asked friends for loans, who refused to help her. These same friends told me that they didn't want to end up like me, financing all aspects of Maggie's life. Remy never managed to study at university. I get the impression that she never really intended to do so, and that using the withdrawal of the university fund as an excuse was simply her way of saying, "I'm not going to study because no one is helping me." If she had had a real interest in continuing her education, she would have applied for student loans or asked her biological father for help. Maybe she tried, but that's the feeling I'm left with. For a time after finishing high school, she moved out on her own. She currently works in a shopping center on the cleaning team, where I occasionally see her when I do my shopping. She doesn't greet me, and I don't greet her either.